Okay, well, so we are going to start with the presentation by Zach Gavasa, who came here in 2014 as a visiting faculty or the visiting instructor, is that right? She really had completely revamped our online and hybrid learning environment for Gen Bio 1 and 2 and developed a hybrid lab that hadn't been employed before. And that was really fortunate because that lab was really essential when it came COVID days, and we were so reliant on those hybrid environments and online environments for learning. In 2016, Sat became an instructor, and then in 2018, an associate teaching professor. So she's going up for promotion to the full teaching professor. And she's been developing these really incredible simulation environments for students and is really focused on the student-centered learning that we're going to hear all about today. Completely revamped the Gen Bio lab and has been, as you all know, just so essential in her service to this department as well, completely helping us in so many different ways with advancing our pedagogical approaches, as well as her curriculum or guidance on our curriculum remapping that has made a huge difference for our students and for all of us. So we thank you, Seth, for your incredible contributions to the department, and we can't wait to learn from you in your presentation. So take it away.
Thank you so much, Evelyn, for that introduction. And thank you all for being here today. So as Evelyn said, I'll be sharing some strategies that I've been developing over the years on how to design learner-centered courses in a way that is time manageable and actually in the long run might even end up saving us some time. And this was working before. So I would like to thank some people some of the few people that have helped me, but it's a long list. So this is just a small group that have supported me over the years. When Isis and Leslie were back in CAD, and they helped me design my first hybrid and fluid course. And the leadership in the department, that Steve and Ligia and Marcy and Navi, who have been very supportive of me trying these new pedagogical approaches back when it was very new, and not having to worry about my performance in the department. And Tekla, who has been surveying my students for several years and helping me brainstorm how to address those issues that come up and continue in this journey of constant improvement. And our former colleague, Sarah Eddy, who would always send me all the latest research in education and biology education and what are the evidence-based practices and how to adopt those into my course. And this is still not working. What is it?
It's not advancing.
Yeah, I don't know what happened. It's fine.
The keyboard went in.
Okay, so something you might not know about me, I'm originally from Colombia, and I actually grew up in a very remote region of Colombia, in the Llanos region, where it might take somewhere between 2 days to 2 weeks to get to the closest town. So this is how the roads look like in the rainy season. So 2 weeks because you might get stuck for a long time. And this is where my house is, and there's nothing around, as you can see. So there was, well, back then there was no internet and there were no cell phones, but there was also no electricity and not even television and no hospitals and no schools. So that means there was no really any education options. So I was a remote student, a distant learner for most of my early and middle school education. And this was because I was very privileged that my parents were from the city and they found a school in the city that allowed me to be a distant learner. And so, give me all the materials for the school year, and I will have all the assigned readings, and I'll have all the practice exercises and all the self-assessments, and I will go on for the full year and work on this on my own and manage my time, and I will even have time to play with the cows, which is one of my favorite activities. And then for the last few weeks of the school year, I will go back to the city and take classes with the regular kids that have been there all along and take the final exams, and if I did well, do it again the next year
What was the city?
in Bucaramanga.
Bucaramanga. Oh, okay.
And what I found was that the way I was spending my time was very different in the city. So in the city, I would go to school all day, listen to lectures, and then in the evening, I will come home. And that's when I was supposed to start reading the textbook and start doing the practice activities and start doing the self-assessments and all the things that actually led to learning. And even though I had just started lecture, I would still have to reread the textbook and redo everything. And so I always found it very frustrating, and that's where my relationship with lecture probably dates from those early years. For today's talk, I'll have 4 parts. The first is just an introduction of what learner-centered teaching is, what it means to me, how I've approached it in my courses, some evidence of whether it's effective from my courses, and some time-saving tactics that I've been using when implementing it. So my first introduction to learner-centered teaching came from this book by Terry Doyle. That was the book that ECs and Leslie gave me when I was doing my first hybrid and flipped class. And it was fascinating to me to see all the research that comes from neuroscience and research from education psychology and the scholarship of teaching and learning all come together to explain the science behind why some teaching approaches are more effective than others, and that there is actual science behind it. So up to there, I used to think teaching was an art, but there's actually science behind what is effective. So to define learner-centered teaching, it's easier to start by what it is not. So on the other hand, we have teacher-centered teaching. And in the teacher-center, as the name says, the instructor is the one that is in the center of the learning process. And our focus is on what is the instructor doing. So what is the instructor saying? What is the instructor talking about? And how eloquent and what they're presenting. But in the learner center, the name says it, the focus is now on the learner. What is the learner doing? How are they moving through the material? How are they interacting with the content? And so in this, I like to explain it to my students using this analogy where the course is like a gym, where you have all the tools that you need in order to get fit. But just like if you go to the gym and you watch the personal trainer lifting all the weights, you're not going to get any fit, right? The only way to get fit is to lift the weights yourself. So you have to lift the weights. And the instructor, the role is like that of the personal trainer, where they would create the exercises, the order in which you should do them, the number of repetitions that you would need, and guide you as you go through that process to achieve your goals. But we cannot lift the weights for you. So I like this phrase from Terry Doyle's book, who does the work does the learning. So in that, I see my job as developing the activities that students need to do in order to.
Seth, that is truly a great analogy. It really is for that.
Yes, they get that one. Another difference between these two models is that in the teacher-centered model, we prioritize memorization and correctness, versus in the learner-centered model, we're prioritizing higher order thinking and trying to make assessments that are more authentic or more similar to what the students will be doing in their professional lives. So I ask students to think, what will your professional job look like? Is it going to be sitting in an auditorium, listening to somebody talk and then filling out a multiple choice test? Or is your future job going to be working with a group of people from different backgrounds, different expertise, all trying to solve a problem that none of you have encountered? And in today's world, that everybody now is dispersed and working remotely, and especially my online students, they are connecting online with people from different expertise and different backgrounds, again, working on problems, coming up with solutions to things that nobody has encountered before, and applying knowledge that they got somewhere else. And again, the emphasis here is mostly on higher order thinking. So this is one of the priorities. And with today's world where you can have anything answered by ChatGPT, this focus on the things that only a human can do are more important than ever. So to me, what that means at the level of a Gen Bio 1 student or Gen Bio 2 is to get them to use that knowledge in a real world application. So my higher order thinking, I'm focusing on application and integration. Can they integrate also the things they learn in chemistry with the things that they're doing in this class, and can they apply that to the real world? But before I can get them to do that, I cannot just take them straight there. They need some background in order to be able to do that. So before they can apply a concept to a different scenario, they need to know how it works. They need to know how that process works. So that is the phase of concept development. But before they can explain how something works, they need to know what it is. So they need to be introduced to that concept. So we need to start with this exploration phase where they get familiarized with what the concept is. And then they will move into understanding how it works. And once they've done that, then can move to that final, how we apply this, how we're going to integrate it with other concepts. And the final difference between the teacher center and the learner center is the type of culture that they signal to students. So in the teacher center, we're signaling to students that academic culture is individualistic and competitive. Versus in the learning center model, we're signaling to students that academic culture is collaborative and supportive. And so this kind of tracks a little bit with this idea of growth mindset that Carol Dweck proposed back in 2006. And so in the fixed mindset, you have the belief that people are either born with their ability, they're either a math person or a science person, and that you cannot really change that. And in the growth mindset is this idea that we can all get better. So even if we may say, I'm not an arts person, if you work, you will get better and you get better at it. Or math person, if you keep working on it, you will improve. And this is very important because when students come into our class, they're asking themselves questions about whether they belong to the class and whether they have the ability to do well in that course. So they're coming in and saying, do people like me belong to this field, belong to this class? Do people like me have what it takes in order to do well in this class? And so the answer is we determine their persistence. If the student says, well, people like me traditionally don't go into this field, don't belong here, or don't have what it takes, then they will start to withdraw from their academics. They were not going to do the work and they're not going to engage. And that will mean they're going to perform worse. And so they will use that as confirmation that they were not suited for that field or for that class. Versus if the answer that the student gets for those questions is, yeah, you belong here and it's normal to struggle, everybody struggles, you just have to push through, find a new way, maybe get some help on a different study strategy, but keep doing it and you will eventually get better, then those students are going to persist and are going to achieve their academic goals. And this is particularly important for students from structurally disadvantaged groups because throughout their prior education experiences, they were probably receiving signals saying, you don't belong to this field, or people like you are not likely to make it, or you might not have what it takes. So then anything that they can pick up on, they will use it as confirmation that is true. So based on that, you will say, well, then the answer is let's just tell the students that they have to persevere and keep trying and overcome the challenges. And yes, that works to a certain extent, but actually what works the most, that has the biggest impact, is the mindset of the instructor themselves. So this study looked at 600 courses, 115 STEM instructors, and they assessed the mindset from the instructor. So whether the instructor had a fixed mindset, whether they believed that students either have it or not, or if the students could improve with effort and get better over time. And they found that in the courses where the instructors had a growth mindset, all the students performed significantly better. But the biggest increase was by students in the darker bars that show students from underrepresented backgrounds. Students traditionally not served by the system had the biggest increase if the instructor had a growth mindset. So why is that? Why is it so much of the difference between the traditional students and the underrepresented students shrunk in half? What are these growth mindset instructors doing? How are they achieving this? And in part is by focusing on what is really important, what they really want students to learn. So instead of having a million goals, having fewer number of goals, but making sure that students really get those goals. And they also convey to students this idea of this growth mindset that you can get better and that you can improve and that your ability is not fixed, that is malleable with every communication that they have with the students. So they're constantly getting these messages. And they're also designing the courses in a way that supports that growth. So the course policies, the course assignments are built in a way so that students can grow and get better. So some of you might have something to write on. So let's take a little pause to recap and collect our thoughts on your ideas on how you think instructors can communicate to students that their academic ability is malleable and that they can improve if they put in the effort. So we're gonna take a minute. Right? Well, with that recap, I'll move to the next part of my talk where I'll share my approach to this learner-centered teaching, how I've done it in my courses. When I'm designing a new course, the first thing I think, or even just a module, the first question is, what do I want the students to learn? And then after I figure out what I want them to learn, then I have to think about how are they going to learn it? How are they going to practice this? And the third point is, why should they learn this? Why will this be important for them? So in that first point of what I want students to learn, I start with very detailed learning objectives, very specific goals that I want students to accomplish for that module, for that course. Always prioritizing that higher order thinking. Then on how they're going to learn it is what kind of practice they're going to need in order to develop those skills, especially that higher order thinking is something they're not familiar with, so they're going to need a lot of practice. But also, what is the background that they need before they can get there, right? So what are the steps that they need to take before they can even get to that higher order thinking? And how am I going to assess that they're achieving those goals as they're going through the material? And not only that, but also how they themselves are going to assess how they're doing. Because if the only feedback the students are getting is when they come to a major exam, and that's when they realize that the study they have been doing for the last 2 months wasn't working, then it's too late, right? But so they need this constant feedback and frequent feedback where they can see how they're doing and if their study strategy is working so that they can adapt and adjust it if needed. And finally, this last point is about motivation. Why should they learn? So they say, you can lead a horse to water, but you cannot force it to drink. The same thing happens to learning, right? We cannot just open the student brain and dump all the information in it if they don't want to be part of it. So I say my job is part half teaching and half marketing. I'm trying to market to the students why they should be engaging with the content. And I see 3 key points for this. So the first one is, why is the material relevant to them? How is the content going to be important for the professional future or their normal everyday lives? And second, why is each assignment important for achieving the goals of the course? So why do they need to do each of these assignments and engage in them? And the final point is, if I do engage in this assignment, is it going to pay off? Or is this busy work? Am I going to be successful if I do this work? So I'll give you an example. This is from my GenBio 1 course. This is how this is the fully online course, how the module is set up. So it's an example of a module. And the first thing to start with is, what do I want the students to learn? So it starts with very detailed learning objectives, and the students get to see this list of the learning goals for that particular module. And always having higher order objectives in mind. In my case, application type of questions and integration type of questions. And I need to start them, because I wanted to get to that application, I need to start with getting them familiarized with the concept. So that exploration of what the concept is. And the assignments that I use for that phase are these videos of Play Pause It that also have embedded questions. And so these videos, this assignment is designed with this growth mindset in mind, that they're getting feedback when they answer the questions on what they're getting wrong and what they need to fix, or what are the misconceptions that they have. It has unlimited attempts, so they're not expected to know everything the first time they try. They can try multiple times until they get it. And it's self-paced, so they can pause and rewind and rewatch as many times as they want to, versus when you're in a lecture and somehow you drop your pen, now you lost what the instructor was saying, right? But here you can pause and rewind as many times. And so I've developed over 140 play classes. Some of them have been adopted by other instructors in other sections or in other courses. Some have over 21,000 views. And these play classes are based on videos that I have in my YouTube channel. So the function again of these play classes is just to get them to a basic understanding of what the concept is. And maybe with the questions, we start getting a little bit into this content development again to understand how it works, but not really. So this part of concept development and understanding how it works is really important for GenBio 1, because in GenBio 1, we're talking about cellular and molecular processes. So these are things on tiny molecules interacting with each other that they've never seen, none of us have seen with our naked eyes, right? And so it's really hard for students to imagine how those molecules are interacting and why are they doing the things that they're doing. So for my in-person classes, I came up with a series of cardboard cutouts that my LAs and I made, and we have a bag for each team, and we walk them through in class on how to manipulate the molecules to simulate the different processes. But for my online class, this was not an option. I couldn't just give them these cutouts and walk them through how to interact with them. So I looked for an online solution for quite some time that would do something similar, equivalent online, and I couldn't find anything. So in 2018, when I took my sabbatical, I learned web development, and I created this platform where I built multiple activities for the specific concepts of the course that will help students interact with the material in this visual and interactive way and hands-on way, and they could get feedback as they go through. So this is just a picture, but the molecules will be moving, and students have to make predictions as to what direction the molecules will be moving, and they will get feedback from that. So it's using this growth mindset approach. They will get feedback if they make any mistakes. It has unlimited attempts. It's not timed, so they can take as long as they need to, but they have to achieve mastery. So they need to master all the concepts in the activity for them to get the points. And how long it takes them, that depends on how well they've been engaging with the material up to that point. This is a list of the activities that I developed during my sabbatical. And it's actual coding. Like, this is not a platform where you just plug and play. You actually have to, every single thing that you see is a line of code. And so here are some examples of these activities. I have one in osmosis. It starts first by asking students, again, this is just a picture, but molecules will be moving, and students have to first see what is the side that has more solutes, and then they will get familiar with the concepts of hypertonic and hypotonic, and then after that, they'll start making predictions about in which direction will water move. And I also have an activity for cellular respiration, where they have to drag all the reactants and all the products, focusing on the movement of the electrons on the carbons. So they have to drag those themselves so that we can see what is the role of the electrons in cellular respiration. I also have activities on the cell cycle, DNA replication, and so on, that I don't have time to show you. So after we start with students doing the exploration phase with the videos, with the play classes. Then they move into this concept development, understanding how it works, and they do this in this interactive visualizations that I created. And now we are ready to start dipping our toes into the application type of questions. But this is the first time that students are attempting to do something like this. So most of them come straight from high school, where their biology class was just memorization. They never tried to do an application type of question. So this first assignment is a homework where they get a set of questions that try to get them to apply those concepts, and some just try to integrate the concepts with other things they have seen. So it's very low stakes, and it's just graded on completion. So I'm not expecting them to get this right, and the purpose of this assignment is not to get it right, but it's just to get practice on how to answer these type of questions. And as long as they submit the answer, they will get the points. And this is I need to make a lot of emphasis on students that there is it's not worth it for them to try to copy the answer or ask ChatGPT to answer the question for them, because the purpose of that is of these activities to get that practice on how to do this type of thinking. If they get somebody else to answer this question for them, they're not going to pass the class just because they get a few points, but they're going to fail later on because they won't be ready for the next assignments. And once they submit the answers to their questions, then they get access to the answers that I wrote. So then they get to see the answers that I wrote. So everybody gets feedback on what they submitted. Even though I have hundreds of students in my class, everybody's getting feedback. I also have a video of me explaining the answers to the hardest questions. And then there is a reflection activity where I walk students through that process of comparing their answers to mine and figuring out what are the concepts that they got and what are the concepts that they need to go back and revisit. So they complete this reflection. In that reflection, I also ask them if there are any questions that they're still confused about that they will want me to go over in class, and any other questions in general that they will want me to answer during class. And so they've done all these steps, this exploration and concept development outside of class. So these are the things that they can do without me. These are the relatively simple, lower level type of goals. And the class time is prioritized for the application and integration, for that higher order thinking. That is the time when I will be with them so that I can help them with the most difficult concepts. So then in class, I'll start by answering the questions that they left, the things that they're still confused about. And then after that, the next item is an individual practice quiz. So this is following the team-based learning model where students first complete a problem set on their own. So this is just for them to have the time to think on their own and be able to read the question and read the answers and start thinking about their own answer. But it's worth a very small percent of the grade. So this is, again, not the expectation is not that they're going to get this correct. It's worth a very small amount of the grade. It's just for them to think on their own. And then they complete the same set of questions, but now in a team where they will be working together with the guidance of the LAs and myself. And the focus here is for them to discuss why they picked the answer that they picked. So it's not about saying, I picked this answer, but why did you pick that answer? So the LAs and I will be walking around the teams, making sure that the discussion is geared towards that why, but what why, right? We're constantly asking, but why? And so this is the larger portion of the grade. So that means that class time, we are focusing on that higher order application type of questions. Now for the third item of how do we motivate students to actually engage with the content and do the work that they need in order to learn it. One is making the material relevant. So I do this by having examples that are related to health and medicine. These are things that students are usually interested in, so they will see the importance of that. But also, sometimes I just ask them in the reflection for them to come up with their own ideas of how the concepts of that module relate to their own life. And not just the concept, but I also want them to connect the skills that they're learning in the class. So they're working in teams, they're solving problems, they're applying information that they learn in class to a new situation. They are communicating effectively with their teammates. So all these are skills that college students are expected to develop, and these are the skills that employers are looking for in college graduates, so that they can see that connection also with their professional future. And the other part is, why are these assignments important? Why do we need to do all these assignments in order to get to where we want? And so I bring up this learning cycle multiple times, saying, well, in order to get up here, we need to take all these steps, right? We cannot just skip to the third floor. We need to take all the stairs. And if they're wondering, well, if we put in the effort, are we going to succeed? The messaging is constantly using this growth mindset where the course is designed for you to do well. As long as you put in the work, it will pay off. So they have that assurance. All right, let's take another pause to recap here. And this time, think about the learner-centered strategies that you're already doing in your courses. And if there are any other things that you would like to try. So with that recap, move on to the third section. Well, I share some evidence I've been collecting from my courses and from other courses and whether this is effective. So this is data from my Gen Bio 2 course. This is the blue before I started using play posits, and in purple when I started using play posits. Now the videos on the play posits have always been there in the course, but there was no way to keep track if the students were actually doing them. Some students didn't even know that the videos were there, even though they were supposed to look at that page. So when I started using play posits, I saw up to a 19% increase in the passing rates when students were required to watch the videos. This is for Gen Bio 2. For Gen Bio 1, I've been doing a lot more changes to some of the class that is really difficult because of all the cellular molecular focus. So after my sabbatical, I started using these interactive simulations that I developed, and I saw a 7% increase in exam scores when I started using that. And then a year after that is when I started using play posits, and there I saw between a 3 to an 8% increase in passing rates with the play posits. And then after that, after the pandemic, one of the great things is that FIU Online created this online live format so that we could meet with students regularly on Zoom. And that also resulted in between a 3 and a 5% increase in passing rates when I can be live with students. And here, the data from here on is not just my courses, it's actually all the Gen Bio sections together, all the Gen Bio taught at FIU between 2016 and 2019. And they're divided in orange, whether they were taught in the lecture format, or in blue, if they were taught in an active learning format. I'm here in lecture. It's not plain lecture. This lecture, they all have active learning in them. So it's not like it's just a plain lecture. But the active learning are the ones with the majority of the time, most of the time in class, the students are working on activities. And also a large, significant portion of the grade comes from those in-class activities. And the students are separated by the GPA that they had in high school. So whether they come into FIU with a high school GPA or a medium high school GPA or a low high school GPA. And what we find is that students that did very well in high school, it doesn't matter which section of Gen Bio they take, they will do equally as well, regardless. For the students that did medium in high school, they do 5 points better if they take the active learning section. And the biggest change is for the students that in high school didn't do so well. They had a low high school GPA, so they probably come in underprepared. They have 10-point increase in their passing rates if they take an active section of Gen Bio versus a lecture class. And then looking at what are the students that benefit in terms of the ethnicity of the students is our Black students that have the largest increase in passing rates when they take the active section than when they take the lecture section. So it's a 19-point increase in passing rates. So much that at that point, there is no difference between in the passing rates between the student ethnicities.
Is that Hispanic numbers, or is that significant? No, right? 86 and 83, is that significant?
So I need to do like a whole linear model and
Yeah.
this is very crude data. I don't know if that's significant. So you might be asking, well, maybe you're just passing everybody. You're just making the course really easy. Everybody gets a point just for showing up and everybody's passing. But they're not really prepared. When they get to the upper division, that's when they're going to pay the price, right? That's when you're going to see reality. So I looked at that. And this is data from genetics, the passing rates of students taking genetics between 2019 and 2016. Now, it's 2020 and their own. I still don't know how to deal with that. So up to 2019, and the same thing. So, but now this is looking at what section of Gen Bio they took and how they did in genetics, also separated by the GPA that they got in high school. So the students that did very well in high school, maybe those that took the active learning classes, I don't know if it's significant, it's slightly less likely to pass genetics if they took the active learning class. And the students that had a medium GPA in high school had very similar passing rates in genetics, regardless if they're taking the active learning or the lecture class. And this is important because we had a 5-point increase in the students that were passing. So we had a larger group of students moving on to genetics and they're still passing at very similar rates. And the biggest change happens with the students with the low GPA, that we had a 10-point increase in the number of students that passed Gen Bio, and not only they're passing Gen Bio at higher rates, but then when they come into genetics, they're also more likely to pass genetics. So not only they're passing, but they're also more prepared for their upper division work. And this is an example from the Gen Bio labs that we work with Tom and with Jessica Liverless of the revamping Gen Bio labs at MMC to make them more learner-centered, us and a team of amazing TAs that we had. And we followed the same recipe. So we started with focusing on what is really important. What is the thing that we really want students to do? And especially that higher level thinking. So for us, we wanted students to think like scientists. So that means that we wanted them to be able to ask questions and pose a hypothesis and make predictions and design experiments to test those predictions. And then collect the data from those experiments and plot those data into a graph and make conclusions from their results. So all the things that scientists do, this are very higher order thinking. And because we really wanted them to do that, we wanted them to practice those skills every single week. So every single week they will do those things. They will ask questions, make a prediction, hypothesis, design an experiment, collect the data, make a graph, and submit a mini report every week with those things. But because those are difficult questions, we know students are not going to get it right the first time. So it is built to support their growth so that they can learn and recover from mistakes. So we ask the TAs for the very first report that the students submit, spend a lot of time giving them lots of feedback and grade this very thoroughly, and then give it back to them and explain to them that it's normal to not do well on the first report. This is the first time they're trying this. This is the first time they're making a graph. They never done it, something like that. It's normal if they don't get it right. But they're getting the feedback in order to make those improvements so that they can change it. And they have to resubmit that same report. So it's not that they will make the improvements and change it for the report they're going to make next week. No, it's that same report. They're going to fix it and resubmit it. And so when they get that report back, it's with this idea of this growth mindset that this is part of the learning process. It's normal to not get it right, and they're going to get better as they keep doing this. And this first report, the grade, once they make the corrections will replace the grade that they currently receiving. So you might be thinking, okay, this sounds good, but it sounds like it's going to take a lot of time, right? And yeah, it takes time to set it up, but in the long run, it actually has saved time. So I already shared some of the things of how I give students opportunities to learn and recover from mistakes, like in the Gen Bio labs where they submit this first report, but they get to fix it after they get the feedback. And also in the Gen Bio classes where they just answer these questions based on completion, and then they get to see the answers that I wrote, and they walk through this reflection where they get to compare the answers to my answers. So this is all done automatic, that once it's set up, I don't need to do it. And I can give feedback to many students. So in the next part, I'm going to talk about how I get students on effective learning strategies and some time-saving tactics for how I give feedback to them when I do give them individual feedback. So for how I get students on effective learning strategies, I start since day one. I'm telling them, college is different. The studying you've been doing for high school is not going to work. This is college. You need to study in a different way. Here's how you need to study. And even though I repeat this every day, it doesn't really sink in and it doesn't make sense to them up until they receive the grade of the first exam. That's when their expectation of how things were supposed to go finally collide with reality. And so this is a key moment because this is when students are the most receptive to this idea. So how are they going to make those changes? So I use this tool on Canvas where you can just go through the grade book, get the assignment, and message students who, and then you can filter by students who score more than a certain score, or students who score less than a certain score. And I have an email crafted for each grade range. So student who score less than 50%, or student who score a D in the exam, or a C or a B. So everybody gets a different exam, and Canvas automatically sends that to the appropriate student. And the keys I have for this email, the things that I really want to address is I need to start by acknowledging how they're feeling. So it's normal that they're feeling frustrated, they're feeling defeated. And even if a student is going to B, which I think is an excellent grade, the student might feel terrible because they wanted an A. So understand that, yes, they might feel frustrated and that is normal. And also acknowledge that the class is challenging because it's not the same as they were taking in their high school. This is a different type of approach, so that they need to use a different strategy. But give them encouragement that if they use that different strategy, they're going to do better. And then specific advice on what are the steps that they need to take in order to make those changes. Now, for providing feedback to students, I have 2 rules. My number 1 rule is I only provide specific comments on assignments that students will resubmit the same assignment. If the student is not resubmitting that exact same assignment, if let's say they're doing a similar assignment next week, I'm not even letting them resubmit that assignment, then that is not giving them feedback. Because what I found is that when that happens, 90% of the students don't look at it feedback. So what I'm doing is not really giving them feedback. I'm writing a justification of why I gave them the grade I gave them, and they're not even going to read it. So why am I wasting my time justifying my grading if they're not going to use it? So I only give feedback on assignments that students will resubmit. And so for the rest of the assignments and all of my assignments, I always have a rubric that is very detailed on what's the criteria that I'm going to be grading them on. And this makes the grading a lot easier for me and somewhat more objective. But this also provides to students the justification of why they got the grade that they got. So when they have a problem or question about the grade, they just look at the rubric and they know where the points were deducted so that it will make sense to them. And even before students submit the assignment, this rubric is also very helpful because it is there on Canvas. So before they submit the assignment, they look at the rubric and they look at their own assignment before they submit it, and they make sure that it follows and it complies with the criteria for the rubric. So they will improve their assignment before they submit it to make sure that it is in agreement with the criteria that will be graded on. So I find that I get higher quality assignments when I have these rubrics. But for when students are doing something that is really difficult, or when the goal is to teach them to do writing, then I want them to resubmit the same assignment, because like Hemingway said, the only kind of writing is rewriting. So if you really want to get good at something, it's about redoing it and using the edits and making the changes. So they need to have that experience, and that's when I will give them specific feedback. But my rule number 2 is that I separate the process of giving feedback from the process of grading students, because these are 2 very cognitively demanding tasks for the instructor. If I try to give them feedback, I have to think, I'm thinking about, okay, what changes do they need to make? Or is the order of topics, what all these things that they need, all the improvements that they could make. And then on the other hand, grading is like, okay, how many points should I take for this? But for the other student, I took this many points. What about this one? Is this worse than the other student did? Is it better? And you go on through all this decision process. It's very cognitively tasking, right? And now you're trying to do those 2 things at the same time. It's just overwhelming. It's just too much. So I separate those 2 things, and I do that I have 2 approaches. One is they have to submit a draft. It's required, but it's worth a very small number of points. So let's say the final version is 100 points. This one might be 10 points, but it's required. They have to do it. And it's just graded on completion, and I just focus on giving them feedback. So I don't have to think about what grade I'm going to give them, how many points I'm going to take off. I'm just focusing on giving them feedback and all the feedback I can give them. My other strategy is everybody's required to submit a draft, and the draft is worth the same as the final version, but then I'll grade it very hard. So this is like the Jim Bio example. So I'm not thinking, do I take 1 point? Do I take 3 points? Do I take 5 points? I just take the maximum points. And so I can free more brain energy for giving them more feedback. But when I give it back to them, I make it very clear that I graded this very tough, because they will be able to make those corrections, make those improvements, and then the other grade will be the one that replaces the previous grade, so that they don't feel that they're being penalized, and it's instead, I'm giving them this because I have very high expectations for them, and I know they can do this better, and that's what I want. I just shout out, I really like using the Turning In grading tool because you can save your comments for year after year, semester after semester. You can edit them and write whatever comments you have and create your own library of called feedback. And when you're commenting on the students, you just highlight the text and you drag and drop the comment that is for that part. And so it makes grading really fast. And so that's we talked about benefits for the grades, but there are also other benefits that come from teaching it this way. I'm sorry it's cut out, but it's trying to say benefits for students and benefits for the faculty. So the benefits for students is that they would understand what they need to improve. Now they know what are the things that they need to change so that they have more agency to make those changes. They know what they need to do. And that will give them more confidence that they can do those things because now they know what to do. So that will reduce their grade anxiety. And that also will make them trust the instructor more because now they know things are very clear and that on their side. So all these leads to greater engagement and deeper learning. And the benefits that I found for me as a faculty has been students are submitting higher quality assignments. And I get fewer questions about the grades and the assignments and how is it going to be graded. So that means I have more time to focus on the difficult concepts and I have a better relationship with the students. And all these has resulted in increased engagement and job satisfaction. And this part is not just me, there's actually research showing that instructors that teach with a growth mindset had higher job satisfaction than instructors that teach with a fixed mindset. So what is next after this promotion? Well, my focus from here on, I'm looking to help support the junior faculty, those that are getting started in teaching, whether it is teaching is their main assignment or whether research is their main assignment, anyone who's getting started in teaching, provide them more support because it doesn't have to be that hard. It was very hard when I was starting, and I'm hoping that it's not that hard for anyone who comes after me. And the second thing I would like to do is I've been sharing the materials I've created with people in the department, people teaching other sections of my course, and even people from other departments as long as it's relevant. But I would like to broaden that access and make this platform that I built more available. And so just the final summary, how I've been approaching this growth-minded, learner-centered teaching, focus on what's really important, what are the things that I really want students to learn, prioritize higher order thinking, especially class time devoted to those very high order level objectives, provide opportunities for students to practice those difficult things, but not only that, but also build the stairs for them to be able to get to that level, so all the background that they need before they get there. Design the course to support student growth so that they have opportunities to learn and recover from mistakes, that they have guidance on how to study more effectively, and always conveying this growth mindset to them that they can get better if they put in the effort, they're going to do well. And all this has enhanced my job satisfaction and my engagement with the job. So thank you, and happy to answer any questions.